Hi, Stephanie.
Hello. Yes.
I'm Darren. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Darren. Nice to meet you
Why
too.
don't you have a seat? Can I get you water or coffee or tea or anything before we
Water
start?
would be great, thank you.
Okay. Here we go.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Nice day out there today.
Yes, it is.
That's good. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for coming in today. And I just want to briefly talk about this area here. So it's a safe space. What we talk about stays here between us, unless you give me consent to speak with another agency person. But our conversations will stay between the two of us in this room. So it's a safe space to talk about whatever we need to talk about. There are limits to the confidentiality. So that would be in cases where I was fearful that you're a danger to yourself or a danger to someone else or a danger to children under the age of 18 that were in your care. And the last one would be if for any reason the court system was involved and they subpoenaed my records, then I would have to give them up.
Okay.
But other than those reasons, everything stays between us. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I always like to start off. Why don't you tell me if there was, because we're limited in our time, but if there was one thing or two things that we could talk about today that would have you leaving feeling like we've accomplished something, what would that be?
Well, I think the first thing for sure would be the involvement of Children's Aid. They've suggested that I come here because of my alcohol and drug use, someone reported me as not being able to get up with my children in the morning, and so obviously there's concern with the care.
Okay.
And there's a lot of other things that's going on that I need to kind of deal with, and I just feel totally overwhelmed by it.
Okay. So kind of two things there. So why don't you just briefly tell me about your children? You brought up your children. So.
Okay. Well, I have Carson is 7 and Colton is 4.
Okay.
Carson actually has a little bit of developmental problems.
Okay.
But other than that they're doing well. They haven't actually been regularly seen by a doctor.
Okay.
I just don't have a family doctor, so.
Okay. So you had mentioned that someone had called CAS
Right.
and reported that the kids were at risk because you weren't getting up with them.
Right.
Okay. And when was that? So how long has CAS been involved?
It's just been recently.
Okay. So just like a couple times?
Yeah.
Okay. So you still have the children?
Yes.
Okay. And CAS is just kind of doing an investigation?
That's right, yes.
Okay. So you'd mentioned the drug use. So let's maybe kind of focus on that. Can you tell me kind of when that drug use started?
Well, mostly like when I was young and when I was with my first partner, Jeff, we used to party a lot and do a bit of marijuana and cocaine, drank a lot.
Okay.
So when I was younger, and then when I found out that I was pregnant with Carson, I completely quit cold turkey
Oh, okay.
on everything. I didn't drink or do drugs at all.
Okay. So when you found out you're
I was
pregnant, you
pregnant,
ceased
yeah.
your drug use. So that was mostly when you were a bit younger, you had mentioned.
Yes.
And so, can you tell me a little bit about the drug use, or what drugs you're using currently?
Well, Yeah, and it's just then recently that I've started back using a bit of snorting cocaine
Okay.
and drinking.
Okay. Perfect. So I have a little questionnaire that I would like to ask you. It's very simple. It is 4 questions, and I just since we've talked about you're using alcohol, um, cocaine, and marijuana in the past, and currently alcohol and cocaine. So if you these are strictly just yes or no. So I'm just going to ask them to you, and if you could just answer honestly or however you feel, that would be great. So the first question: have you ever felt you ought to cut down on your drinking or your drug use?
Yes,
Okay. Have people annoyed you by criticizing your drinking or drug use?
yes,
Have you ever felt bad or guilty about your drinking or your drug use?
yes.
Okay. And the final question: have you ever had a drink or used drugs first thing in the morning to steady your nerves or to get rid of a hangover?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much. That's a very simple little measure there, but it is quite helpful. So I also just wanted to ask you, I should ask at the beginning, but I'm going to start doing so now, but if it's okay if I take notes during our session. It just kind of helps me remember everything. And so
Sure, I
can...
actually brought some notes with me so I didn't forget some stuff.
Oh, great. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so with that in mind, I was wondering if I could get you to fill out this questionnaire for me. So basically, it's a questionnaire that focuses on your drinking,
Okay.
and this will be more geared towards your current drinking.
Okay.
So the drinking that you're doing now.
Now.
So if you don't mind, it's just it's fairly quick as well. It's 10 questions, and if you don't mind just filling that out very quickly for me, so
Can I borrow your pen?
yeah, it just would be helpful for me to get a better picture of current usage. Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll look at that a little more in depth after we have our conversation. So that kind of screening and assessment tool that I've used there is for the alcohol. So I kind of wanted to look a little bit too at the cocaine usage, current cocaine usage. So in your opinion or your feeling is the cocaine usage a problem? Like, does it constitute a problem?
I think it's beginning to constitute a problem because I wasn't, a couple of times there I wasn't able to get up to look after my children, and so definitely it's beginning to be.
Okay, that's fair enough. And how are you using it? Are you snorting it or?
Snorting, yes.
Okay. Only that's the only.
Yes.
Okay. And how much are you usually using at each time that you're?
Well, usually the guys do like an 8 ball, but myself I've just been doing like one line, snorting one line.
Okay. So usually just one line when
Yeah.
you've been doing that. Okay. And when is the usage happening?
Well, I work at a bar, and I work on the night, the night shift, because it's the tips are better and stuff. So it's after the bar closes, and with just with other acquaintances and barflies.
Okay, sounds good. So I kind of answers my next question. I was going to ask where it was happening.
Yes.
So it's
At my
happening.
place of work.
And so it's just, is it happening anywhere else or just at
No,
your?
just at my place of work.
Okay, and I'm assuming that your boss doesn't know that this is
No.
going on. Okay. All right. Well, that gives me a clearer picture of the cocaine usage as well. So I kind of want to not shift focus, but a couple important questions that I'd like to ask you here. In terms of looking at your family. So, is there anybody in your family that has had a drinking or a drug problem in the past?
Yes, my mom, she's deceased, but the drugs, or alcohol was a big problem with her.
Okay. So her death was a direct
Direct
result?
result of her alcoholism, yes.
Okay. Anyone else, or just your
No,
mother?
not just my mom.
Okay.
Mostly.
And what about mental health in the family? Anybody with any mental health concerns or?
My dad suffers from depression.
Okay. And has he suffered like basically his entire life?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, adult life.
Okay. So CAS has asked you to get involved with us?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so I think that gives me a pretty clear picture of the drug use, and it must be difficult, um, like you had mentioned about your children, and it sounds like you really, really love your kids.
I do.
And
The most important thing to me.
good, and I'm glad to see that you've accepted CAS's suggestion and came in to meet with me today. I know it's not easy to talk about a lot of these things, and it's difficult, but we can certainly work through things and come up with a plan. So I just wanted to commend you on that.
Thank you.
So just being cognizant of the time, let's shift gears a little bit here to focus on some of the. You had mentioned that you were very overwhelmed and had lots of things kind of on the go, and
Right. Yeah, those things I kind of wrote them down
Oh,
too,
okay.
so I'd
well, that's
hopefully
great.
not forget to mention some of them. But obviously, I'd like to be able to get a better job so that I can, support my children better, and so I'd like to look into some job retraining.
Okay.
Also, I'm not happy in the housing situation we're in. There's, people use a lot of drugs, and it's just a low income
Okay.
housing development, and I'd rather be out of there if we could.
So see that also shows me right there with that that you care about your kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you want them to have a good upbringing, and if people are using drugs in your housing complex, then you're wanting to move for your kids. So that's also a strength that you can definitely see here.
Well, I definitely want to be a better mom for my kids, and
Okay.
so that's what I'm working toward. I would like to work toward.
Yeah.
And also, I think I mentioned that we haven't had a family doctor forever, so the kids have just really been, seen as like a walking clinic.
Okay.
And I also mentioned that Carson had some developmental delays, and he was doing an enrichment program at school, but for some reason it was just dropped, so I don't know really where that stands at all.
Okay.
Myself, I had a psychological evaluation done, must be like a couple or 3 years ago, but I never got any feedback from it, so I don't really know where that stands either. So I really, I kind of feel like I just don't have a future, and I'm just stuck in a rut right now. And
Okay. And so, just in terms of the psychological assessment that was, so that was your family doctor who had put in the referral for
Yes,
you?
yes.
Okay, and what was the basis for that? Like what was happening with you, or what symptoms were you having that prompted your doctor to make the referral?
Well, I'm feeling depressed.
Okay.
I was feeling like down and, as I said, kind of in a rut, and just kind of, there was no real positive outlook for the future.
Okay. Well, that's definitely something that we can look into, trying to locate that, or potentially setting up something again. Just because you had mentioned about the feeling depressed and some of the symptoms, I have a short questionnaire here that I was wondering if you could just go through. It's quite quick, 9 questions, and it'll kind of just give me a better idea of how you're doing right now in terms
Okay.
of your depression and your feelings of depression. So if you don't mind just checking that off, it's quite easy. Great, thanks very much. So I'll have a look at that a little bit more after as well.
Okay.
And I just want to talk a little bit too here. It's important. When you mentioned about having the depressed feelings, and I can understand. You mentioned having CIS called on you, that could be quite upsetting for sure, especially when it's obvious that you want to do what's best for your children, and then to have someone question that, it can be. I can see how that can be quite hard or upsetting.
It was upsetting at first. I was more pissed off than anything, but then I kind of realized that it is important that I'm able to look after my kids. That's very important to me.
Yeah, and I think by you taking the step, by taking their advice and coming in here today, that's kind of a first step, and you're really showing that. So I just want to ask you, though, with the depressive feelings, have you been having any thoughts of suicide or any?
No, not really.
No?
Again, I'm really want to be a good mom, and I want to look after my kids, and I want to be there for them.
So your kids are your protective factor, kind of. You're motivated for them, and you want to be around for them. Okay, that's great. Well, what I can tell you, kind of from what we've went through today, is I think our organization could be quite helpful for you.
Okay.
Really. So kind of, I'd like to just kind of summarize what we've talked about, and kind of talk about what I've noticed and goals for the future for working together. So basically our agency is an outpatient addictions center. So you could come in and receive counseling for your drug use. You can see a counselor one-on-one. We do also have group options, so that's certainly an option to come in. It would also, I think, benefit maybe a counselor could maybe work with you in terms of maybe practicing some role modeling to simulate the situations at your bar of if you're wanting to say no to the drug use.
Right.
So I think that could be quite helpful. We also offer case management services, and I think that, from what I'm hearing from you, it would be quite helpful, because you've mentioned that you have a lot of these, a lot of things. So, for example, you want to move. You want to get out of your current living situation. So a case manager could get information on that. Also about Carson's enrichment programs at school. A case manager could get in contact with the school and try to figure out, why those classes stopped and whether he could, if there's another opportunity for him to get back into it. You'd mentioned about your family doctor. You haven't had a family doctor for a few years, so that's something that could be broached as well. And then also your own psychological assessment, trying to find out what happened with those results, or if need be, I think it would be probably important anyways to have one conducted now, because it has been 3 years, so I'm sure a lot's changed. So that's something that could be arranged through the case manager or through your family doctor. And then you'd also mentioned about having your Ontario Works worker that is someone that could look into funding options for you and the housing, but you haven't talked to her for a little over a year, I think you had said. So that's something else that we could look into. So that's kind of what I've observed, and I've observed that you really care about your kids. That's why you're here.
Absolutely.
You do have a lot on your plate, absolutely. But I think it's important to remember that a big strength that you have is that you were able to quit using substances before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe during our next meeting, when we have a little bit more time, we could focus more on how you were able to accomplish that.
Okay.
Because if that's what you're looking to do now, I don't know specifically what your goal is, if you want to cut back or do you want to become totally abstinent again. But it's something we can certainly look at together and like I said, try to figure out, well, what strengths did you have before, what strategies you use, what coping skills you use.
Right.
Because it all comes back to what you said. Your goal is you want to be a better mother for your kids, and you've listed off all these things here today. And in terms of your family, I know you had mentioned your mother had passed away. Do you have any other like supports from your father or other family members?
Well,
or?
I see my dad like fairly regularly, maybe once or twice a week. I don't really talk to him about my troubles because of his depression, and
Okay.
I have a sister that I'm pretty close to, but she has her own children and busy with her own job, and just really don't want to burden her. So no, I don't really have anyone that I can talk to about my situation.
Okay, so that would certainly be challenging, and definitely another not a reason, but another another good part of coming in and talking to one of our counselors, because if you're not having anybody to talk to on the outside, then that's quite challenging.
Mm-hmm.
You certainly look into that. So how would you feel then if we set up another appointment and you can come in and see me, and we can talk a little bit more about your current situation, and talk about some of the addiction counseling, and also that case management part where we can really get everybody else involved together, so it's like a cohesive unit. Because I think that from what I'm hearing here, like the housing, the school, CAS, our organization, that's really that would be the best approach, because it's a lot of collateral
Resources.
contacts,
Yeah.
exactly, and a lot of resources. exactly. And all those things would would have to be your consent too, to share information. Like, I mean, I can look into these other things without using your name, right? So that, for the housing unit, for example, but for school, if I was to talk about Carson, like, I mean,
Right.
it shows that you're involved with me, right? So we would have to talk about consents and all those types of things. But I think that is definitely a good option. So why don't I look into a few of these things in terms of the housing unit before our next um, meeting? And I always like to, because I'm working for you, and I hope that you'll do a little bit of work for me in the week that in the week before you see me again. So would you be comfortable at this point of, I have a number that I can give you, of contacting the hospital and setting up to get a new family doctor? Would that be something that you'd be able to work on?
I could look at that, sure.
Okay, and if you have any issues with it, then certainly just get in contact with me or bring it up at our next meeting. But if you feel comfortable doing that, then that would be a great help and a great start in us moving forward together.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right, well that's that kind of does it for today, I guess. But let's we'll set up another time to meet together in about a week's time.
Okay.
All right, well thank you.
Thanks, Derek.
No problem. Thanks, Stephanie. Really appreciate you coming in today.